Namaskar and a very warm welcome to the edition of Phone In Program. I'm Nidhi Kumar and you're watching India Science. In COVID-19 cases, India has achieved new milestones by administering the highest doses of vaccinations. Over 72 crore doses were given 2 days back, and now the number has moved up to 74 crores. In today's phone-in programs, we bring to you your COVID queries live. In this phone-in program, you can ask your questions. We take your queries live. We're joined by the very eminent Dr. Mathew Varghese, an orthopedic surgeon who runs India's only polio ward at the St. Stephen's Hospital in Delhi. And in 2018, Bill Gates had described Dr. Varghese as one of the 5 real-life heroes of the world. He's also received the Award of Honor for Reconstructive Surgery in Polio Patients in 1996, among many other awards. Many thanks for joining us today on India Science. Thank you so much, Doctor, for sparing your valuable time.
Thank you so much for having me here.
My first question to you, sir. In the midst of this pandemic, a new outbreak, what do we know of the source of Nipah virus, and are there any other RNA transmitted virus as well?
Well, thank you for the question. In the middle of all this, there has been the scare of Nipah virus. You see, there are so many different species of viruses. For example, even the coronavirus, there are about 200 species of them. All of them are around. In fact, bats harbor many of them. But there are many, many viruses. Many of them cause illnesses. Many of them do not cause illnesses. Many of them cause very mild illnesses. So in nature, there is a large number of these viruses around. RNA viruses are there, DNA viruses are there. You have the spectrum. Any one of these species that are in the animal kingdom with some mutation can jump from the animal kingdom to the humankind. So the jumping of the viruses from one species to the another depends on certain mutations that happen in them. And mutations are normal for all living beings. When they multiply, certain errors in multiplication can be genetically transmitted and they become permanent variants of that particular condition. So this is norm and mutations can happen. And also we have different varieties like Nipah. It is just coincidental that Nipah surfaced again after a lapse of many years.
Absolutely, doctor. The next question is, why are we seeing so many COVID infections in fully vaccinated people abroad, if I talk about the global perspective, and even why is it happening so in Kerala?
Oh yeah, the answers to these are completely different. First, I'll talk about internationally. You see, if you look at the vaccines, you look at the efficacy of these vaccines. If you look at the international vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna, these were the earliest to be authorized for use in human beings on a larger scale. Do they give 100% safety? No, they don't. They give a 90% protection. 90%. So 10% there is an escape possibility. In addition, the 90% does not eliminate the virus from infecting you, but it produces a very mild disease or less severe disease that you don't end up in the ICU or you don't end up in the morgue. So looking at from that perspective, and particularly if there's a newer variant, for example, the Delta variant, most of the testing that were done, phase 3 trial that happened, they were to do with the Alpha variant. They were not with the Delta variant. When the trials of Pfizer and Moderna happened in the US, they didn't have the Delta variant. Delta variant came much later. In the second wave in India, the Delta variant happened and then spread to other areas. So the spread of the newer variant, the efficacy is less. It is not that it is not effective. It is less effective than in the Alpha variant for which they were tested for. That is the norm. Having said that, the studies increasingly, there is a research study published in August also in the New England Journal of Medicine, very clearly says that the seriousness of the disease produced in vaccinated cases are much less serious than in the ones which are unvaccinated. So vaccine is useful, it is protective, and also the variants, if they are there, they will infect you but cause a milder disease. So what is the message here? So the message that opening up completely in terms of failure to use the mask or failure to use the hygiene for hand hygiene sanitization in the absence of a very 100% effective vaccine, and in the absence of a herd immunity, which before Delta variant came, it was believed that it will be around 60%. After the Delta variant came, it is now believed that it has to be over 70-80%. So the virus will infect as long as there are susceptible human beings. These susceptible human beings will get infected if they are exposed to the virus. So Delta virus, if it is there, it will infect, but the seriousness of the disease is markedly reduced by the vaccines, and that is a huge advantage. And in the West, they opened up no masks. So many places there are no masks at all. They are using no mask. And if there's a Delta variant, it will infect, but the mortality is lesser and the seriousness lesser if you were already vaccinated. In the West, there is another problem. There's a huge anti-jab campaign going on. The anti-vaccine lobby is very powerful. In India, the anti-vaccine lobby is there, but it's a much smaller, it's a minority community. So therefore, the number that we have, it's a remarkable feature globally. 74 crores is not a small number. It's a huge number of population being immunized, albeit may not be all the 2 doses, but definitely at least one dose has gone to 74 crores. That's a huge achievement by any standard, logistically, giving it in terms of supply chain logistics, whichever, it is a huge amount. Coming to the Kerala thing, it is completely different. Kerala, in true words, is the state that has truly flattened the curve. Now, in the other states, for example, Delhi had a huge spike, Mumbai had a huge spike. Kerala never had a spike like that. Kerala, the testing has been the highest in the country. The tracking has been the highest. So if you test more, the number of positive cases will be shown as more. If you track more and test more the tracked cases, again the number of positives will be more than any other state in India. And that is what happened with Kerala. Kerala, the public health system has been so good that they were able to keep the disease from going into a spike and into dizzying heights of number of cases and also overwhelming the healthcare system. They kept the numbers low by testing and tracking and isolating and keeping everybody under track and control. And the result was the healthcare system is having a number of cases because there are a large number of people, herd immunity has not been reached there. And vaccination is still on. So until you have herd immunity, there are a large number of susceptibles. And as long as susceptibles are there, you will have corona cases. So Kerala figure is different. The international figure is different. But both seem to say, oh, you're not controlling the virus. No, that's not true.
Absolutely, doctor. Another question coming to us from Aditya from Nagpur, and he wants to know what is the difference between polio and poliomyelitis? And also, please explain a precaution since you've done remarkable work on polio. Sir.
Yeah. Fortunately, we have eliminated polio from India. We are polio free for the last 10 years. Again, one of the most remarkable achievements of health in this whole millennium, I would say. We have never have this kind of a success other than smallpox in eradicating a disease from our subcontinent. But remember, polio virus is still there around in the world. In one or two countries, it is there, and we hope that the issues in Afghanistan and in some of the disturbed parts of the world where few cases are still there, wild virus polio it is called. Polio is a short form for poliomyelitis. The word myel refers to your spinal cord. The spinal cord is referred as myel. An inflammation of the spinal cord is myelitis. Like infection of this in eye is conjunctivitis. Infection of the throat is pharyngitis. Infection of the larynx is laryngitis. Infection of the appendix is appendicitis. Similarly, infection and inflammation of the spinal cord is myelitis. So, poliomyelitis is the complete expression for paralysis caused by polio virus.
All right, sir.
The
We go on to
precautions,
the next
the,
question.
the, the
Yes.
precautions, the precautions for polio. Polio is a virus which spreads by feco-oral route of transmission. What do you mean by that? The viruses, the wild viruses are excreted in the feces, in the stews, which goes into the sewage water. The sewage water contaminates the drinking water, and from the drinking water or flies sitting on the feces, coming back and sitting onto open displayed food items. That is where the virus comes, and when you swallow this water contaminated or swallow the food that has been contaminated by the flies sitting on them, you get the infection. Fortunately, Indians don't have to worry at this point of time. We are protected, only our borders have to be protected from entry from outside areas. And the government has a
Thank you.
beautiful program for tracking all the borders so that no one is allowed in from any area which is having polio to come into our state without vaccination against polio.
Absolutely. Another question coming to us from Varanasi. The caller is Raveen. I'm taking this up for him. He says, if I have an immune disorder, is it safe for me to take the vaccine?
Lovely question. A lot of people were really worried. In fact, when in May, June, when the virus was just spreading in India, very early stages, very few cases were there. I happened to have a case, and this boy had come from Nigeria and he had HIV infection, immune compromised, low immunity. I wanted to operate him for surgery. When I tested him, he turned out to be positive for corona. Not only HIV, but also corona. So I was petrified because the literature was not there on what happens when a corona infects an HIV patient. So I was reasonably certain that this boy will have a very poor outcome. But when I followed him up, 2 weeks down the line, he had no symptoms. He had no symptoms. So, an immune compromised patient will have no serious consequences from the infection, though he may excrete the virus for a longer period. So, he may test positive for a long period, but the serious nature of coronavirus, from all the literature that is there, comes from the autoimmune nature of reaction. So, in immune compromised patient, the autoimmune reaction is not so good, and therefore they don't have that kind of a reaction. So, you don't have to worry to that extent, except that they can excrete the virus for a longer period. So, others around him need to protect themselves from that person for a longer period, and he also must wear the mask for a longer period. The other side of it, there are autoimmune disorders like you have bronchial asthma patients, like you have rheumatoid arthritis patients, like you have ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, so many immune disorders where the immune system is hyperactive. So there was also fear that some of these patients will have a poor response. So it turns out that though theoretically it is like that, practically it has not been found to be so. So initial hesitation in vaccinating them in the fear that they may have a hyperreaction to vaccine has also not been borne out. So if you look at the Association of Rheumatologists world over, in Europe and other places, they have now found and recommended that patients with autoimmune disorders like rheumatoid arthritis are safe to have the vaccination also. And even when they have the disease, you don't have to worry to that extent unless there are other comorbidities. I've been following up a large number of these patients with corona, and one of my own patients who had rheumatoid arthritis, she succumbed, but she had other diseases also, which contributed to her comorbidities. So it's not just one issue. So don't worry, autoimmune disorders, whether poor immunity or hyperimmunity, both patients can have the vaccines, and that is the current recommendation. The only thing is, the immune compromised patients, there is a suggestion that the immune buildup that they have may not be as good, therefore they may need a third booster, not one or two doses, but the third dose. So these are the cases where they are recommending the third booster dose. WHO has
Third
clearly
booster.
said you don't need to have third booster dose, because in terms of global ethics also, people are not getting one dose. So
Yeah.
we are lucky. We're lucky. We have a fantastic vaccine system. We have a fantastic vaccine manufacturing area which is going on, and therefore we have enough numbers. There are countries where they don't have the vaccines, they don't have the delivery system. So ethically, it seems that it's fair that while we have one and two doses, they also get a dose or two, so that they can also be safe. Because unless the whole world is free from corona, no one is protected.
Very true. We have another question from Rakesh Kumar from Surat. He writes in on our YouTube, if we are scheduled for elective orthopedic surgery such as arthroscopy or a joint replacement, uh, should we take the vaccine? And if so, what are the precautions we need to take after taking the vaccine, doctor?
Very, very lovely question. If you are planning an elective surgery, very good. The reason I said it is a good question, because the word was very clear: elective surgery. Elective surgeries are planned surgeries. So the recommendation is, if you are wanting to have corona vaccine and you've scheduled it and date came and the date clashes with the date for your surgery, the recommendation is, do not plan your surgery soon after your vaccination. Why? Supposing I have the vaccine today, there is about 40 to 50% of patients will have pain in the arm, about 40% may have headache, or 40% may have low grade fever for 1 or 2 days. So therefore, the vaccine related adverse events, we don't call them complications, we don't call them side effects. The term used for vaccine related problems are adverse event following immunization, AEFI. So the adverse events following vaccination will confound you with problems that can happen after surgery. So you wouldn't know whether the fever was because of vaccination or because of infection after surgery, and therefore you would not want this to be coming together. The second thing is, if you think that you're going to a hospital and you don't want to get infected from other hospital patients or staff also, because many staff members, like more than 50% of my staff had corona infection, more than 50, despite all the precautions, we got infected. And therefore you can get the infection in a hospital setting by the doctors, the healthcare workers, the nurses, the housekeeping, and also from the other patients that are there. Therefore, if you're scared, you would want to vaccinate. But if you vaccinate, would you have the immunity immediately? No. Your immunity takes about, the earliest is about 2 to 3 weeks, and therefore having surgery before 2 to 3 weeks, if you were thinking of immunity after one dose, is not sufficient. So if you either you have your full dose and then go for your elective surgery, or you have your dose, and if you don't want to postpone it for whatever reasons, at least wait for 2 weeks or 3 weeks before you go in for the elective surgery. And the logic is very clear. You don't want the adverse event from the vaccine to confound with the adverse event following your elective surgery. We don't want to mix the two adverse events. And secondly, if it is for immunity sake, make sure you have both the doses, and that means you have to give a gap of at least 6 to 12 weeks before your second dose, and then only you get your immunity.
Yes, doctor. Ms. Kartika writes in to us from Delhi to ask you to explain myalgia and why does it happen after COVID?
Sorry, I lost you. lost you on some disturbance. Can you repeat the question?
Right, right. I'll just repeat it. This is Miss Kartika from Delhi. She wants to know if you could please explain myalgia and why does it happen after COVID?
Okay. The
Some kind
word
of an inflammation.
myos, yeah. Algesia word refers to pain. Algesia means pain. Analgesia means a painkiller. And with those without, algesia is pain. Analgesia is without pain. So myos refers to muscles. Myalgia means pain in muscles. Pain in muscles is because of the increased metabolic activity that you have, severe metabolic activity because of any viral illness. The virus enters your body, they infect multiple cells, and they use their cells to multiply themselves. And therefore, the metabolism in the cells are all very high. And active levels, with the metabolic levels being very high, pain producing substances are produced, especially if you have fever going on. So if you have fever, there are inflammatory cytokines that are released. These inflammation, what is an inflammation? These produce fever, these produce body ache, these produce, so these cytokines, they are the ones which produce fever and body aches and joint pains and all kinds of headaches and other symptoms. So these cytokines acting on to your muscles cause pain in the muscles. So some degree of cytokine activity, inflammation, along with hypermetabolic activity, with the degree of fever, and often fever means all your blood vessels are dilated, and your blood vessels, especially in your skin, are used to control your body temperature. So all your blood vessels are dilated to dissipate the heat. When you dissipate the heat rapidly, your core temperature goes down and you tend to have shivers. You shiver when you have high grade fever, you also shiver many times. So that also increases muscle activity. So all these things combined together cause body ache or myalgia.
Right. Another question that is coming to us, and we would like to request you for your understanding of the same. We're seeing this Delta Plus variant 1.617.1, AY.1, AY.2, AY.3. What is your take on the vaccines and how effective would they be against these variants? If you could explain this, and then we'll go on to the Sputnik vaccine. People are wanting to understand the composition of this vaccine, sir.
Yeah. So if you were to look at the Delta variant, it just happened. The viruses, they multiply at such a rapid rate that millions of them are produced in a short span of time. And if millions are produced, the probability of even a 1% error or a less than 1% error, which can become a major mutant that is having problems, is higher than, much higher than in the other living beings, much higher in the virus. So therefore, mutation is normal. So Delta variant happened by sheer chance, by it's unfortunate it happened. Advantages to the virus, contagiousness was very high, and therefore it infected a large number in a short span of time. The Delta Plus was another variant very similar to Delta, genomic structure, but slight difference. But the unfortunate part was it was called Delta Plus. Delta Plus means probably it is more infective or more serious diseases produced by this, which is not true. Delta Plus variants is a variant. So maybe it should have been called Delta variant 1, Delta variant 2, Delta variant 3, version 1, version 2, version 3. Maybe that would have been the nomenclature which is appropriate. But the unfortunate plus tag got attached to it, and everybody started getting afraid. But fortunately, Delta Plus was no more contagious or did not produce more serious disease than Delta variant, fortunately. So don't worry about that. Now the issue on the Delta variant, I already answered that question partly. all the vaccines that were generated, of all the vaccines, the first one was Pfizer and Moderna, which were tested against the alpha variants. So when the delta variant came, suddenly the fear came, maybe your vaccines will be ineffective. So
Mm.
until studies were done, you could not really prove this way or that way. Okay, so what were the platforms on which these vaccines were based? If you look at the vaccine platforms, one is the nucleic acid based vaccines, just the mRNA vaccines, the synthetic mRNA vaccine, which are the Pfizer and Moderna. There's a DNA vaccine which has just come. India can be proud that the first DNA vaccine in the world to get approval for emergency use authorization. Okay, so the Zydus Cadila vaccine is one of the first one DNA vaccine which can produce. All of it is aiming to produce what is the spike protein which will stimulate the immune system. Now, the Delta variant also has the spike protein, and that is what causes the cell entry. But there are some enzyme systems that are different in the Delta variant, and therefore, entry into the cell is faster for Delta variant than for the Alpha variant or the Beta variant. So, therefore, the structure, though the genomic structure has certain key points which are there, they are not significantly different genomically. The target protein is S protein. The other platforms are the killed virus, which like the Covaxin. The other platforms are the vector-based spike protein targets, and those are the AstraZeneca or Oxford AstraZeneca and the Covishield vaccine. The Covishield vaccine, which is manufactured in India, it's also the Oxford vaccine. So this is having a vector. What is a vector? If you have a spike protein, you can't inject it, it won't enter into the cell just like that. It will stay wherever it has been injected. If you add that spike protein onto a carrier, which is a vector, a vehicle, which is the chimpanzee virus in the Oxford vaccine. So the chimpanzee virus is the carrier virus onto which is saddled the spike protein, which is then injected as the vaccine. And this then enters the cell and that stimulates the immune system. So that is your. So you're not sure whether vaccine will develop against this or not. But since Delta variant also has a spike protein, it did produce a reasonable amount of immunity as evidenced by recent studies published in fact, again, the New England Journal of Medicine has an article in August issue which clearly states the Delta variant provided, the Oxford AstraZeneca provided almost 60% plus benefit against the Delta variant also. So they are producing effects, and the Pfizer Moderna also there is benefit, but with after a single dose the number is very low. It's about 39, 40%, 43% or so. But after 2 doses, the protectiveness is better. So these are the variants. And if the variant was too significantly apart, supposing the virus had mutated to the extent that spike protein was not used to enter the cell, then perhaps the S protein vaccine would be ineffective. But fortunately, in the Delta variant, the Alpha variant, the Beta variant, the spike protein, the S protein is the entry key to the cell in the human body, and the immune system is triggered by the S protein, and the vaccines are based on that production by RNA or DNA or a spike protein itself on a carrier virus. Now, in the question on Sputniks, in the Oxford AstraZeneca, they use the chimpanzee common cold virus, adenovirus. Okay, first dose chimpanzee common cold virus, second dose chimpanzee common cold virus. So both doses have an animal virus being used as a carrier vehicle for this virus S protein. So this theoretically can provoke a reaction when you give the second dose, not the first dose. When you're given the second dose, you can have a reaction. So the other alternative is the human body based virus, human adenovirus, that is human common cold virus. Where is this used? The Johnson and Johnson Jensen virus vaccine is a human adenovirus carrier vehicle with the spike protein on it. So that's one category. So that reduces the probability of an adverse reaction. But what did the Sputnik people do? The Sputnik people did one species of adenovirus for the first dose and second species of adenovirus for the second dose. So the probability of the second dose causing a reaction because of a past memory of exposure to the first dose is eliminated. So that is the theoretical foundation of using two different virus carriers, so that the body doesn't recognize the carrier vehicle and attack that.
Yes, sir.
That's all. That's all.
One last question. Yes.
Otherwise, they are reasonably protective.
Absolutely, sir. And we're proud of our vaccines. We're proud of the science and the innovation behind them as well. One last question to you before we leave. We're running out of time, sir. And this has been flashing on our YouTube for a long time. Would you like to tell us if the third wave is coming, and if so, when? And also, I know it's a difficult one, and also maybe some precautions that people might take.
Thank you. I have been saying this right from when the spike was happening. The spike happened in cities with dense population, in cities where the Delta variant came. And the Delta variant, because of contagiousness, the Alpha variant was rather, benign, I would say, because there everybody knew where they got the infection from. Whereas in Delta variant, nobody had a clue where they got the infection from. And in Alpha variant and Beta variant, only one member in the family was affected. In Delta variant, everybody, mother, father, grandfather, everybody was affected. It is so contagious. So if you've had such a highly contagious virus and 80% are mild symptoms or no symptoms. So the numbers that we had in the spike, almost 80-degree gradient in the spike, the numbers, large number of people have been infected. On top of that, we are having vaccination in a large number. So for herd immunity, we need to have the number of immune people in the community, either by infection or by vaccination, to be more than 70%. If you take that logic, large number have had the infection with symptoms. Much more than that, larger number has had the infection without symptoms, and a large number are getting vaccinated. So the number of susceptibles in the community are less, and it's very difficult to get an infection with a contagiousness with a spike more than 80-degree spike. So I have been saying this for a long time now. Third wave will not come like the second wave. It will be not a wave, it will be ripples. In areas where the virus has not had a hold, where the vaccination has not had a hold. So where vaccination is inadequate, where viruses not had the time to infect people because it didn't reach their small communities, small towns, villages, remote parts of the country, where the virus did not reach, and with things opening up, it might now reach and infect people by finding them susceptible, finding them vulnerable, and cause infection. So until we have sufficient proof, scientific proof, that though the antibody titers have been found in the study by ICMR to over 70% or so, antibody titers are reasonably there. Despite that, there are large numbers in the community who are susceptible, and therefore, as long as they are there, susceptible enough, and we have not had herd immunity scientifically, we should keep ourselves safe. And the best method, I have not missed a single day in my hospital in the entire 1.5 years. I've held children with corona positive screaming with just this mask on my face and sanitizing every time. These are the two most important protections that you can have. When I'm holding a child, I'm not distancing. That's important. Stay away from places where people are gathering. Stay away from places where unknown people are there, where you are likely to have an infected person distributing viruses to everyone and blessing them with the virus. Stay away from there. But don't give up your mask and don't give up your sanitization until scientifically the healthcare professionals in the ministry and the government announces we are now safe to go without masks and without sanitization.
And on that note, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Mathew Varghese, for joining us today. And with this, friends, this is the wrap on this edition of Phone In. Corona, remember, is not over. There is a very real possibility of a third wave. We have to get more and more people vaccinated. And till this goes away, there's only one way to deal with this. As doctor said, take the jab and keep safe. On that note, many thanks for watching. Namaskar.
Namaskar.